we've heard from so many of you that it's like the daunting process of like LLC formation, how to get your, register your business, all the unsexy stuff that can be just like a little daunting. We're going to make that undaunting. So I'm here with Cathie, and she's a U.S. attorney, or an attorney, as she's told me. It's not a U.S. attorney. My fault on that one. And she's just got a ton of experience. She actually teaches courses on this. When she first showed me her syllabus, I was like, we've got an hour and 15 minutes. You could do this for months. So we're going to make this in hyperspeed mode. And so just so you know, slides will be available after. Our team here is taking incredible notes that we're going to send as part of the recap. So again, pay attention, lean in, but don't feel like you've got to be scribbling everything down because we're going to go at warp speed, right, Cathie?
Indeed.
Hell yeah. Okay, so big thing here, because there will probably be a lot of questions that you do have. You can pop them into the Q&A, and Cathie will do every 10 to 15 minutes just to check in as we move through these topics. So lean in, get your questions answered, and at the end of this, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable about getting that business off the ground. All right, Cathie, over to you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. So it's nice to see everybody, or not see everybody, but I know you're out there. I've been on the event since this morning, and I have to say this is feeding my soul as an entrepreneur. Just some great messages, and so I feel like I'm getting so much out of this, and hopefully can give a little bit back to you all. So just by way of background, I'm an attorney. I'm based outside of Washington, D.C. I'm an entertainment attorney, which is a business, right? I have customers. I have my own back office. I do marketing. I have a brand. And this is what I'm doing now. And 2 iterations ago, I also had a different kind of business. I ran a newsletter. So I was an electronic publisher. So again, different kind of business. And then in between those 2 things, I worked for a company that bought and sold other businesses. So I had a lot of experience working with entrepreneurs in that space. So that's my background. And like all attorneys do when speaking in these public sessions, I'm an attorney, but unless you coincidentally happen to be one of my clients and you have a signed letter with my name on it, I am not your attorney. So I'm going to be providing general education information here, but not legal advice to anyone's specific factual situations. So let's talk for a minute about running a business. There's the thing you do, which could be, manufacturing and selling, nurses, surgical scrubs, or selling African fashion. Or I talked to someone in the networking session who is launching a rideshare app. I happen to be providing legal services. So we'll call that the thing you do, your actual good or service. And then, when you run a business, you have a second job, which is called running a business and dealing with taxes and corporate setup issues and marketing and all the back office stuff. So we're going to be talking about that. But just to kind of level set at the beginning, and I should mention, I'm actually not going to be using a slide deck like a PowerPoint. I do have some props here in my office. I know my background's kind of boring, so I thought I'd bring some props into this. But I will be preparing kind of a written outline of what I'm talking about. So again, you don't have to frantically take notes as we go, because there will be some written assets afterwards. But going back to what I was saying, so there's, your goods or services and running the business. And what I would say is, there's a lot here, right? You think LLCs and tax and da-da-da. My advice is figure out how to do all that stuff in a manageable way, because you don't want it to overwhelm, what you're really doing, which is, baking cupcakes or, interior design or whatever your thing is, right? So we're going to be talking about this stuff over here. And this has been touched on by some of the other speakers, but I'll just emphasize, when you're an entrepreneur, I think it was referred to earlier, being a CEO is eating glass, or the constant challenges. And yes, it is. There's always something comes up. And, I think going into, I know people here, there are people who are thinking about starting a business, and I know there are people who've launched many businesses. But for those of you who are, thinking about getting into it or about to get into it, you will need to be resilient, because there's always something, and you're not working in an established company where you can go down the hall to the IT department or, you know, with the HR department, you are the IT department, you are the HR department when you're starting out. But that's fun, right? You know, it's kind of like, hey, I can figure this out. You know, you Google some stuff, you look at some YouTube videos, you get a book, you talk to people who've done it. You got this. And we're going to talk about getting advisors, your team, your accountant, your lawyer, your business banker, your insurance broker. You're going to build a team. You got this. So let's start talking about, well, actually, one more thing before we start about starting your business. I've made some assumptions here. First of all, I'm assuming that you are thinking of starting your own business versus buying into a franchise. We're not going to be talking about franchising. I know there's a lot of people from all over the world. Unfortunately, I have a US centered focus. So some of the things I'll be talking about may or may not be relevant to your country, but maybe some of the principles will be. And what was the other thing I want to mention? I'm also going to assume, and I think this is a theme we've heard, is that, you know, you're not rolling in money to start up your business. You are either doing this as a lean startup, or you are thinking of getting money from investors. So that is definitely how I started both my businesses. I did not have outside funding, but my business, I'll give you my example of my law firm, I needed a laptop and business insurance and, you know, a few other small things. I wasn't manufacturing something. I wasn't opening a brick and mortar storefront. So obviously, depending on what you're doing, your capital needs will vary. But even if you do have to launch with outside investment, I'm assuming that the plan is to do it as lean as possible. And there's a real value to that, because look, if your monthly commitment is low and you have a bad sales month, it's not so bad, right? Whereas if you're spending, you know, $10,000 a month in expenses, you know, to break even, at least for that month, you've got to at least exceed that in sales. So the smaller you can keep your committed spend, it's a little more peace of mind, right? And then as you grow, you can say, oh, you know, I think I will take that bigger space, or I think I will, you know, commit more in ongoing finances. So those are the things I'm operating with. So let's start your business. And first, I need to show my first prop here, which is a roller coaster. Because running a business it's like being at the carnival. You're on the roller coaster up and down. Actually, the analogy I like is the fun house, where you're going through and the floors are shaking and the walls are spinning and the mirrors, you know, it can be a little like, woo, but, you know, just go into it with it. This is an adventure. It's all fun. Okay, so let us start with a question that a lot of early business people think, do I need a business plan? And I think the answer is yes, sort of. It's a very good exercise to kind of go through on paper and just, you know, kind of say, okay, what are all the things that I need to think about, right? But I think Arshel said it so well, which is, you know, at some point you just got to launch and then you make iterations, because you can really get caught up in analysis paralysis. And I have to quote this because it was so good. Perfection is another word for procrastination. Thank you, Arshel. I will use that. I have used that. I will continue to use that. But you really don't want to just sit there and mull and never do it. So at some point you just gotta kind of decide that you're going to do it. And of course you have the question of, well, if you have a day job, are you going to start your business nights and evenings? You know, you have to think about, am I competing with my employer? Do I have a non-compete? So you'll be thinking of that. But going back to the business plan, I think it's a good exercise. One wonderful resource that I would recommend to all entrepreneurs is a website called SCORE, SCORE.org. And they have a lot of templates and resources for entrepreneurs. And one of the things they have is guidance on a business plan. So there's no need to spend money and buy a book on a business plan. Just go to score.org, look at their resources, and that'll help you put something together. So do a business plan, but like, don't look for the perfect business plan. Just get it like 80% good. And then, you know, we're gonna adjust as we grow our market. You've heard that throughout this session. So the question I get a lot from clients who are starting a business is, what about a name? Okay, so here's the deal on names. There are really 3 names you need to think about. One is the name of your business. So we'll talk about entities in a minute. Let's say you've decided you're going to start an LLC, limited liability company. So you need a name for that limited liability company, right? So I'm going to just make this up. There's a lot of cicadas here outside of Washington, D.C. So we're going to start a company called Cicada Yoga, and you will be doing yoga, and there will be cicadas in the room, and you'll just be in tune with the cicadas as you're doing your yoga. Maybe that's not a great business idea, but it's the one that came to mind. So the name of my company is going to be Cicada Yoga, LLC. That's the name of my business. So then I think, oh, it's a business. I'm going to have a website. So I go to GoDaddy or some other website domain registry, and I say, is the domain name cicadayoga.com taken? So that's your domain name. So that's separate from your entity name. And then, of course, you have your brand name. And again, my brand name might be Cicada Yoga, but my brand name could also be, I don't know, Buzz Yoga. But your brand name is the thing that you might trademark to signal to people when they see it, it's that yoga, right? Just like, you see a certain label on a piece of clothing, you're like, oh, it's that company. So you've got your company name, your domain name, and your trademark or your brand name, which you can register in the United States for a trademark if you want to. So the 3 different names. And I always tell clients, start with the domain name, right? Because domain names are the hardest to get. All the good ones are taken. So sometimes it takes a bunch of tries before you find a name that works. So I would start with the domain name. The state, when you register your LLC, it's actually a lot easier to find names. It's rare that I've found that someone has a company name that's already taken in a state, unless it's something really obvious, like Coca-Cola, something like that. And another thing I would do is just, spend some time on Google, check out, are there other companies with my name? You can also go to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO. They have a database called TESS, TESS, like the name. And you can put your name into that database, and you can see if other people already own the trademark for that. So it's just good, you don't want to go into a market. Maybe there's another Cicada Yoga in my city. That would be silly to open another yoga studio. Not only will there be market confusion, but that other company might come saying, we got this name first. So just do your diligence before you pick your name. The other question I get is, and someone had asked, can it all be the same name? Yes, in an ideal world, that would be great, right? My business name is Saadeh PC. My domain name is Saadeh PC. My logo is Saadeh PC. So yes, you can definitely have all the same name. People then say, okay, I have a logo. Do I need to trademark it or copyright it? And let's just quickly talk about copyright and trademark. So copyright is, I am a creator. I've created some art, some original content. I want to control the rights to that. That's copyright. So trademark is, I have some words or a design, a logo, that is a signal to people in the consumer marketplace, hey, this word or logo refers to that brand, okay? So they're different concepts. So people, you can trademark a logo, and you can also copyright a logo. In my experience, I don't see a lot of smaller businesses copywriting their logos. Certainly like the big companies, like use Coca-Cola again, the red with the white swirl, they've copywritten that. They don't want people taking that and using it to make other forms of using it without their permission. So someone asked again, where's the trademark info? USPTO, I think it's .gov, and the database is TESS, TESS. So I get the question a lot, do I need to copyright my logo, register for federal copyright? And the answer is, I don't see many people doing that at the early stages. So let's get into the question everyone wants to know. What should I be? Should I be an LLC? Should I be a corporation? Should I be, what should I be? So the answer is, it depends, right? But let's talk about what we're talking about, first of all. When you do a business, you can just start a business as a sole proprietor. That's how I did my first business. was just me. I didn't set up a corporation or an LLC. But if you want some liability protection, meaning if something goes south and people sue you, you can say, you can get my business assets, but you can't get my house and my personal checking account. That's why people set up entities. I also say people set up entities because it, first of all, gives a professional appearance to your business. And also, I don't know about you, but I like to keep things organized. And I know that everything I do through my entity is business related. So it's just like a handy bucket to put all your business stuff. So the types of entities, sole proprietorship, just you. Okay, and we get into entities. Partnership is just when you and someone else get together and just kind of speak into the world, we're a partnership. Nothing formal really even has to happen. I don't recommend that. I actually haven't seen any of that in the last 20 years of all the businesses I've dealt with. And the reason is if your partner breaks it, you buy it. There's a big liability exposure there. So we'll move quickly through partnerships. And there's two types of partnerships: general partnerships, that's what I was just referring to. Some of you may know of limited partnerships. I would say, if you're thinking of a limited partnership, you'll probably talk to your attorney about this, but probably the LLC is the better way to go. So let's talk about LLCs. They're great. They're super flexible. They are, you don't have kind of the formality of a corporation. You don't need a board of directors in an LLC. You can have them. Because, as I said, they're flexible. So LLCs, I'll be very candid, most of the businesses I see at the small and medium size are LLCs. Now, depends what kind of business you're doing, right? If you are planning a business that you know is going to grow like a weed and you are planning to take over first, United States and then all of North America, and eventually, you've just got crazy huge dreams. Some people will say a corporation is a better way to go. However, I will tell you, I've seen very successful businesses, big businesses, multi-million-dollar businesses be LLCs. So I think an LLC is, it seems to be a very common choice for entrepreneurs. We'll talk about corporations real quick. A corporation is, a company that has incorporated. So under state law, there's like a Limited Liability Company Act, and there's also a Corporations Act. So there are different sets of laws. So when you're an LLC, you set up under the LLC stuff. Corporation, you set up under the corporation stuff. And they are a little more formal. You might have an annual meeting requirement, whereas an LLC, you can say, we're not going to do an annual meeting. So again, it is an option. So a corporation, if it just sets up as a corporation, that's it, doesn't do anything, it's called a C Corp. A C Corp. And a C Corp is just a corporation. Now, if you set up your corporation and you're like, I've heard there may be some tax advantages to electing S Corp status. S is in small. You file a piece of paper with the IRS and you elect S Corp status. And there is a tax difference for that. And I'm going to stop right here and say, I'm not an accountant, B, I'm not a tax attorney. So you'd want to talk to either an accountant or a tax attorney to kind of crunch the numbers there. But here's the kicker, right? So you decide, okay, state, I'm going to be LLC, I'm going to be a corporation. If you're an LLC, this is a little mind blowing, but stick with me. You can still elect to be taxed as an S Corp, okay? It's like, what, huh? So as I said, a lot of people like the LLC form, and there's a lot of flexibility in taxation. So let me rewind for a minute. We're picking the type of entity, LLC, corporation. That's what type of entity you are. There's something else out there, which is called tax classification, okay? So I just mentioned you can set up as an LLC, but you can elect to be taxed as a partnership, a C Corp, or an S Corp. So it's a little confusing. There's no such thing as LLC taxation. The IRS, let's back up. Back into the history books, right? There were partnerships and corporations. Picture the 30s, the industrial age, da 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 da. LLCs came along in like the 90s. And I think I'm guessing the IRS said, you know, we've got partnership taxation, we've got corporation taxation. We're not going to invent another category for these newfangled LLCs. So when you go to the IRS website, which by the way is surprisingly helpful, there's actually, let me get my prop out here. Where did I put it? There's this handy guide from the IRS. Can you guys see that? Starting a business and keeping records. Very handy publication from the IRS. It's publication 583. So if you get this thing and you read through it and you're like, okay, I'm going to start an LLC. Where's the stuff about LLC taxation? You're not going to find it because the IRS only thinks in terms of partnership and corporation taxation. I shouldn't say only, there's many other flavors, but those are the big two. All right, so hopefully that'll help straighten you out a bit. So someone has said, I know a lot of VCs and investors require Delaware C Corps. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about, so we talked about what type of entity. Then you get to pick your state, right? Because everyone's like, oh, Delaware. Delaware is a great state to set up. Everyone knows Delaware has great laws, right? Or New York, you hear this a lot. So this is what I would say. When you're starting a business, you got to pick your home state, okay? I'm in Maryland. My home state is Maryland, okay? But then as your business grows and goes out into the world, let's say you start your yoga, Cicada Yoga in Maryland, and it's so successful, you decide you're going to start in Virginia, which for us is right over the bridge, right? So you start some brick and mortar yoga studios in Virginia. All of a sudden, Virginia is going to say, hey, you're in our state too. You have to, now wait for it, this is going to sound really strange, but these are the words. You have to qualify as a foreign LLC in Virginia. Okay, so what does that mean? It means filling out a form and paying $100, $200, $300. So I say this because if your home state is your home where maybe you live and work, and you know your business is local, you know, probably makes sense to set up there. Unless you're thinking super long term, you might move. Maybe you are gonna, sell to investors, and you think just everyone's comfortable with Delaware. Sure, but again, I think for small and medium sized business, you can start in whatever state you're in, and then if you do expand, you will have to qualify as a foreign LLC or foreign corporation, whatever you chose in those other states. So, going to the person who said, "Hey, Delaware C Corps, that's the way to go." Let me say, if you are in Kansas and you say, okay, fine, I'll pick Delaware as my home state, you can do that. But guess what? Kansas is probably going to say, hello, you are sitting in our state doing business here. We want you to qualify as a foreign LLC in Kansas. So my thought is you're setting yourself up to be dealing with two different states. So you think about whether you really just want to use your home state. Having said all this, this is something to talk to your attorney about. Again, general education, but this is just sort of generally how I think about these things. All right, so when you start your business, you will file with the state. And one of the things it will ask you is, who's your registered agent? And the way I think of a registered agent is like a Venus flytrap that just sits there waiting for a lawsuit to come to your company, right? And knock wood, that's never going to happen, but it's a requirement when you start a business. You have to appoint a registered agent. And in most states, that can be, I shouldn't say most, in many states, that can be you, as long as you're generally in one spot all the time. But there are also third-party companies that will act as your registered agent for not very much money, a couple $100 a year. Which could be a lot of money. I shouldn't say that like that, but relative to other business expenditures, it's not the biggest one on the list. So you'll have to pick a registered agent. And then when you set up your company, you will file articles of organization. If it's an LLC, typically that's what it's called, or articles of incorporation for a corporation. So here's an important thing. I'm going to talk about LLCs because that seems to be, what most entrepreneurs will start with. You'll file your articles of organization with the state. You wait a couple of days, the state will say, boom, you've got an LLC. So you get your articles of organization. I always say that's like your birth certificate, right? Like you exist, your company exists, yay. But there's a separate document for LLCs that's really important, and it's called the LLC operating agreement. And that's sort of like the rules of the house. And they can be, you can put all sorts of stuff. It's a very flexible form. You can say, in this LLC, we wear purple sweaters on Wednesdays. You make the rules you want. But there's a pretty standard form to that. What people often get confused are the LLC operating agreement does not get filed with the state. It just sits on your shelf. Okay. So we've talked about entities. We've talked about tax classifications, picking your state, registered agents. I'm just going to take a quick swing through the questions. All right. I think we are in good shape. Okay. And I'll come back to the questions at the end. Okay. So let's talk a minute about your business team, because it's really, and I've already mentioned attorneys. So here's my next slide. I don't know, one of us is in here. You need, I would say, 4 people. You need an attorney to do some of the stuff we're going to be talking about. You need an accountant, unless you're really handy with numbers and accounting. But this is, I guess I would say these are my recommendations. I would get a good business attorney. I would get a good business accountant. I would decide what bank you're going to have your business checking account in, and find a business banker there, and an insurance broker. So you might be saying, I am starting this business with $500 and my credit card. How am I going to afford all these people? So first of all, your business will go to the bank first. That shouldn't cost you any money. And I will tell you, I have a wonderful business banker. And I have asked her so many questions, and it's free, right? Because I have my account at that bank. So that's a great resource. Your insurance broker, you're not going to pay any money for their services. What they do is you tell them about your business, and they'll say, oh, I think you need this type of insurance, and they will run out to carriers, which are the companies that actually write the insurance, and get quotes for different policies. And a good insurance broker will come back to you and say, okay, you need a liability policy. Here's what this company's offering. Here's what this company's offering. I recommend this one. But again, you're not paying the broker themselves hard dollars for their services. I think one time I saw someone who charged like $100 service fee, but they're getting paid by the insurance companies to place the policy. So that's another resource. So let's talk about attorneys and accountants. I will tell you, as a attorney myself who has clients, and my clients are filmmakers and artists who really don't have, they would much rather use their money to hire more actors for their film than pay their lawyer. So I have a lot of clients on very tight budgets. I think the thing to do is find someone in your community. Word of mouth is really good. Get a few names, talk to a few people, and be upfront and say, look, my legal budget right now is X, and this is what I think I need. What do you think I need? And a good vendor, whether it's an attorney or an accountant or whoever you're working with, can say, okay, for that budget, this is what I think we should prioritize. Or you might be too small for me, but I know someone else who works with smaller clients. But I think especially there's a temptation to kind of go on the internet and look at forms and be your own lawyer. But I do think long term you're going to need a lawyer. I mean, when you get around to writing your privacy policy, for example, that's really hard to do. So you'll need to do right. So build that relationship. It's just another person on your team. And same thing with accountant and bookkeeper. Everything I just said applies there. So let's keep going back to setting up your business. So you set up your entity, you got your registered agent. You might need to rent office space, right? And again, there your attorney can help you read the lease. Is there anything in the lease that's gonna, jump out and grab you? That would be handy. Let's talk about bringing people into your business. In the United States, there are 2 types of workers. You are either a W-2, an employee, or you are a 1099 contractor. So if you have people who work for you as employees, you're running payroll, and there's a whole set of laws that apply. If you hire people who work for you as 1099s, it's really what you and that contractor agree to. Okay, so I say this because when you're starting up, you may know from day one you need employees, right? Or you may think, okay, I'm going to do this by myself, and from time to time I might need to bring people in. What I will just say here is that it's not really up to you whether someone's a contractor or an employee, and it's also not up to that person whether they're a contractor or employee. There's a law that applies, and basically it's, the way I would summarize it is, if that individual is sort of like their own person and you just say, hey, I need this job done, can you do it? And they're like, yep, got it. And you're like, good luck with that, let me know if you need anything. But they're using their own equipment, you're not controlling how they're doing it, that's a contractor. Whereas if you are managing someone kind of very granularly, and telling them how to do it, when to do it, they're using your equipment, they're on your premises, they're not doing it for anybody else, well, that's walking, talking, quacking like an employee, and you do need to pay them through payroll. So again, that's something your attorney can guide you through. What I see from time to time when people kind of do their own forms, they will hire a contractor and they will say, this employee will blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, they're not an employee, they're a contractor. So I always like to emphasize these two buckets of workers. In the interest of time, I won't go through the entire HR landscape, but I did connect with someone in the networking session, and we were talking about what their business needs are. Shout out to Kimberly. And she said, how do you retain good employees? So let's talk about that for a minute. I would say the first thing is obviously treat people well. That's first and foremost. We've all worked for people who, make us pull our hair out. Don't be that person. Try not to be that person. Challenge them, help them grow, be fair, communicate, all that good stuff. And none of that costs money. That's just good management. And then you can do the small things like little handwritten notes. I used to work for a company, and every once in a while someone would, drop a note off, and just a note of thanks. I mean, that goes a long way, right? You can offer annual bonuses. You can offer what's called spot bonuses. Hey, I noticed how you handled that customer back there. You did a really great job. Here's a little spot bonus for you, $100, just a token of appreciation. Could be small, right? That'll go a long way. And then you get into things, if you've got a sales force that are out there selling, obviously salespeople are often set up with a commission plan, right? If your monthly target exceeds this, you'll get this much money, a commission plan. What some entrepreneurs will say, they'll say, you know what, I'm bringing in these people at the early stages of my business. I'm going to give them a piece of my business. Ooh, equity. That's, equity is a very valuable resource. And sure, there could be people that you truly want to give part of your company to, because you want them to have the upside, right? You want to, if the company grows, you want them to enjoy that success. You can give them outright, let me back up, equity, right? I walked down to Maryland Department, right, what we call it here, Division of Corporations, we'll call it. I set up my LLC. I get my articles of organization. I'm 100% owner of my company. I own all the equity in my company. But there's a yoga instructor who's just doing a phenomenal job. She really gets the cicadas, right? So I want to reward her. I could give her a piece of my company. I could give her 10% of my LLC. That would be equity. But that's what I'm talking about in terms of equity. It's kind of like shares of a company, shares of an LLC, percent of the LLC. But let's talk about other ways. You could offer stock options. You can offer, there's these things called profits interests. They're sort of like stock options. There are all sorts of incentive plans that can be structured that don't actually involve giving equity in your company. And another thing I will add is, if you are starting your own business, it's really important that you don't inadvertently give away control of your business. So as long as you own 50% or more, I would always say 51% or more of your business, you control it. And you can bring in what's known as a minority shareholder. A minority investor, that's just a word we use to say anybody who owns less than 50%. So as long as you own more of your company than anybody else, your company, your rules. And if somebody down here doesn't like it, if you've done things right, you still get to rule the roost. So again, that's why it's important to work with an attorney when you're thinking about bringing other people into your business, because you always want to make sure, unless you're ready to step back and give control to somebody else. And at that point, that's a decision you want to just you'll make with your eyes open, right? But you don't want to inadvertently let that slip out the door. All right, so let's see. Always good idea to have term start date and stop date for contractors. Let's see. All right, we will keep going here. Let's talk about money matters. So money matters. I had thank you for your patience here. Money matters. Okay. When you start your company, once you get that great email from the state saying, congratulations, your LLC is in existence, you then want to go get a federal employee ID number, an FEIN. Sometimes people call it an EIN. And you may say, wait a minute, I'm not even thinking about employees. Why do I need a employee ID number? And the answer is that is sort of like your company's social security number, or for those of you overseas, your national identity number. You will get this number and you'll be asked for it all sorts of different ways. So just get one so you have it. And there, you can do it online on the IRS website. Pro tip, make sure you're actually on the IRS website, the Internal Revenue Service website, because there's a lot of lookalike sites, but it's an easy form to fill out. Takes 5 minutes, hit the button, you got your EIN. Sometimes you get kicked off, you have to do it in paper, but usually it works pretty well. We mentioned setting up a business banking account, and let's talk about corporate formalities. I say corporate formalities, I am talking about LLCs as well, but you're starting a business, and a business is its own thing, and it needs its own business bank account. It needs its own credit card. It needs, it's its own thing. You don't want your personal stuff to kind of blend into the business stuff. Keep them separate, okay? So you'll set up a business bank account, get a business credit card. When you set up a business bank account, they will be asking for your federal employer ID number. They may also ask to see your LLC articles, or your LLC articles of organization, or if you're a corporation, your corporate articles of incorporation. They may also ask to see your LLC operating agreement. Didn't mention the corollary to that on the corporation side is bylaws. So those, again, rules of the house, how the company is going to work, bylaws for corporations. So you'll elect a tax year. You can just say my tax year, my fiscal year is the calendar year, and most businesses do that, but you could certainly say my fiscal year is going to end on May, June 30th, whatever. But once you pick it, you generally have to stay consistent year over year. And if you change it, you've got to check with the IRS. You will need an accounting system. Stepping back, I loved listening to all the mission, the why, what's our mission? This is so important, and I just echo everything about that. Having said that, you're not setting up a charitable organization, you're not setting up a hub, you're setting up a business, and a business makes money by selling goods and services. And so you will be producing something and you'll be getting money in for that. And you need to keep track of that money. So you can do a couple things. You can make sure you have enough money to keep playing, right? Because if your business loses money month over month, eventually you'll be like, okay, I have no money left. Game over, like the video game, right? Game over. So you want to stay in the game. You need to cover your expenses. And the other thing too is you need to understand how the money's coming, how the money's going out, and how the money's coming in, so you can make decisions, right? When you're in the thick of it and spending money, it's good just to kind of step back and look at your financial statements, your balance sheet. How much do I have? How much do I owe? Your profit statement of profit and loss this month. this is what came in, this is what went out. So those financial statements become really handy tools. So you need a system to keep track of all that. QuickBooks is a very popular system for that. Some people hire bookkeepers who will set up their accounting systems and keep track of receipts and things like that. So you can have a bookkeeper who kind of does that monthly data input. And I mentioned before, an accountant. Accountant kind of gives the big picture, kind of strategy look at your business finances, and can also help prepare the business's taxes. What else? Payroll. We talked about if you have employees, you will have to run payroll. And this is something I would definitely suggest outsourcing because you will, if you run payroll, I think you're making 10 filings a year, 4 quarterly with the federal government and an annual, and then 4 quarterly with your state and also an annual state. The annuals being the tax returns, I guess. But the point being is that's just one more thing. And there's a lot of good, relatively low cost providers out there. QuickBooks has a payroll function in it, and Gusto is a newer company that I've heard many good things about. But there's plenty other ones. So just, payroll is one of these things that, generally speaking, there's some things you can kind of figure out on your own. Payroll is one you probably want to get a vendor to help you with. Let's talk really quick about vendors. Someone pointed out in the note, the federal employee ID number is free, and that is correct. It is free. Let me just talk about vendors really quick. There are, I guess I will say it. There are 2 kinds of vendors. There's vendors you love, and vendors that you're like, not so sure. Find a vendor you love. Find a vendor you love. These are people on your team, and you need a vendor that you're comfortable with, that you can ask, oh God, I should probably know this, help. You want that kind of relationship with any vendor you work with. You don't want to feel, first of all, like if the vendor doesn't return your calls, or they're hard to get a hold of, or you get a hold of them and they're talking and you just don't understand what they're saying, like you just don't connect. Nothing personal, right? Sometimes people just don't have the right chemistry, or they're just not on the same wavelength. Find another vendor. It's really important that you have people on your team that you just feel good about and you trust. And you'll get that sense of whether someone knows what they're talking about. The other thing too is you will outgrow your vendors. Okay, you will pick vendors when you start, and you're like, these are the right size. They can handle the basics for my brand new startup business. But as you grow, you may find that, the bookkeeper who was great when it was just like you and like 3 receipts each month, now that you've got operations in California, Hawaii, and London, maybe you need someone with more expertise. So it's natural. It's the progression of business. Just be attuned to that. Let us talk briefly about, let me just make sure I've covered all the things on money. I think we are good. There's so much more I could talk about, right? Privacy policies. We did mention we talk about this. So there's 2 types that businesses will have. They'll have a general privacy policy for like everything in the business, and they'll have a website privacy policy. So most businesses these days have a website, and you could have a really simple website that is just like basically like a business card, or you could have a website where people are putting in their credit card numbers, and there's maybe a chat function and a forum function. What privacy policies do is they tell people, hey, here's the information we collect about you, here's how we use it, and a bunch of other stuff. And your privacy policy will depend on what you do. You could be the kind of business, going back to my yoga studio, maybe I'm keeping a database of all the people who have attended my yoga studio, and then I want to monetize that by selling that database to a company that makes yoga clothes, right? We've all gotten mailing lists where you're like, hey, how did they get my name? It's like you have one hobby, and the next thing you know, you're getting all these, mailings from other businesses around the hobby. Someone has sold a list with your name on it. And so again, depending on what your business is doing, depending on the type of information you collect, you'll need to adjust your privacy policy to reflect that. So that's one of the things I do think it's good to have an attorney help you with. Tech and IT security. So when you are your own business, you are your own IT department. I had an experience, my first business, where I went to get on the computer and I got a blue screen. And I was like, oh, and I'm not a tech person. And it ended up with, I had to get a screwdriver and like unscrew the back of my computer and put in a new hard drive. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm actually doing this. I figured out, I forget how I figured out how to do it, but it was that experience that said, if I can like figure out this computer thing, I can probably figure out all these other things that are going to come my way when I'm running this business. So have the confidence, you can figure things out. But IT can be an area where it's like, what do I do? Again, you're a small business. You may not have the money to hire an IT consultant, but maybe there's people in your life who know about computers. So it will happen. You will have the glitch and you'll be like, ah. So let's say that. IT security is, we've all been reading about these hackers and obviously companies can get hacked. Think about what type of information you're getting and if you really need it. For example, in the film world, I often see forms prepared where it's like, the actor's name and, their address and then their social security number on a form. And I take it out because I'm like, yeah, you probably need that actor's social security number when you run payroll, but let's not just write it on a piece of paper. Maybe they can call it in and you can write it down. Like we don't need it floating around out there. But whatever your business is, be mindful of the personally identifiable information you're taking in. And you'll want to think, you can Google IT security for small businesses, right? Cybersecurity for small businesses, but it's something to be mindful of because, we know what happens when there's a hack and that's time and energy and cost and liability for a company that you can avoid by putting some sound practices in upfront. Let's talk briefly. I'm going to try and land right at 2:00 and then kind of go through a few of these questions and some kind of general principles. Contracts. There are basically two kinds of contracts, right? There's the kind that you enter into. So you own a business and you say, you know what, Cathie's right. I need to get some, I'm going to hire an IT consultant because I know bad things will happen with my computers. I'm not going to want to deal with it. I'm just going to get someone lined up. So you find someone in your community who knows about computers and they send you a contract, Bob's or Susie's computer service, and Susie sends you her contract. And so you have to evaluate that vendor contract. So that's one type of contract you'll be dealing with. And the other contract is possibly, depending on your business, with your clients and customers, right? It could be maybe a click-through contract. It could also be, if you provide any kind of professional consulting services, they might enter into a service agreement. Now, yoga studio, when people come to my yoga studio to, do the poses with the cicadas, I'm not asking them to sign a contract, but maybe I am, right? Maybe I'm saying, enter into a 12-week package and you get a discounted rate. It's a piece of paper, it's an agreement, it's a contract. So again, those are the kind of things we recommend you have an attorney review. Let's see. One thing I mentioned about building a team. I also want to include other business owners. I mean, obviously the Ladies Who Launch group is a phenomenal resource, but within your community, even people you think might be competitors, you will be surprised. Business owners are very friendly. We've all been there, done that. We know how hard it is. And, if there's someone in your community you admire, or maybe the next community over, so not quite a direct competitor, or maybe in an ancillary market, go have coffee with that person or a Zoom or whatever. But that's another key part of your team. Just people you can pick up the phone and say, hey, how do you deal with this? They can be a valuable resource. And also, they can say, oh, I have a really good accountant, a really good bookkeeper. And yeah, people are throwing things in the chat. Please keep doing that because I'm going to come back to that and make sure we talk about some of those things. Real quick, some tips. there's a lot of moving parts when you start your business, right? What I did for my law firm when I started, I did a Kanban board, Kanban, but I basically took sticky notes, and every time I got to do this, I'd put it up on the wall, and I had this whole wall full of these sticky notes of all the different things I needed to do, because some things, have to go in a certain order, right? Like I needed to get a credit card before I could buy my laptop because I wanted to put everything on my corporate credit card. Or I had a research service I needed to subscribe to, and I couldn't subscribe to it until I had my credit card. So you kind of put things in the order that they have to happen. And then as you accomplish things, you take the sticky note off the wall and you put it over there. And then I learned about Trello, and I said, I could have been doing that electronically. So now I use Trello for some of that organizational stuff. But keep track. There's going to be a lot of moving parts. Stay organized. I like Kanban boards approaches. The other thing is you will have more passwords than you can imagine when you have your own business. I mean, it is like, use QuickBooks, that's a password. Use Trello, that's a password. Use LinkedIn, you guys know this, gals know this. Keep track of that. And, LastPass is one thing people use. You can use a little password book that you lock up, whatever it is, but stay organized, because when you're running your business, a lot's going on and you don't want to spend where's that password? So just have them all together, one place, plan ahead to stay organized on those. One thing I have, and since it's right here, I will show you, I have a little reference book. When I started my business, I decided I work primarily from home, but I have a business office in my house, but I work primarily from home, but I have a virtual office where my mail goes. So the first thing I did was I got to remember this address. So I wrote it down, and then I got my federal ID number. I'm I got to remember this. And I wrote it down. And then I worked on my brand and my logo and my colors. And I have a pink, I have a gray, I have a black, I have a white. And I'm I got to the hex numbers, the Pantone numbers, I got to write these down somewhere. So it became my reference book of all the things that I just have to quickly know where they are. So I really recommend that to a business owner, just handy reference book. Phone, when you set up your phone, I only needed one line, but they gave me 3 lines. And I'm I got to remember what the other 2 phone numbers are, right? So I wrote them in my book. Really helpful. Same thing with emails. It helps to stay organized with emails. My folder structure, just to share, I have a folder of all my customers. Obviously, it's not going to make sense for if you have a cupcake business, you're not going to have a file for each customer. But in my business, I'm a lawyer. Each client has its own little folder. And again, whatever makes sense to you for your business is the right thing to do, right? So for me, it's customers, vendors, industry. I'm in the entertainment law industry, so I am involved in, organizations that do that. But if you're in the yoga business, you might have Yoga Studios International, maybe Yoga Studios of New York, just do, get those things organized like that. I sometimes joke, she who is the most organized wins. But there's a lot of moving parts when you run your business. So some of this, think about things from an efficiency standpoint. Let's go ahead and talk quickly about just some other tips. Sometimes, and we've been talking about it today, some businesses are set up just one person, a solopreneur. Other people start businesses with other people, which is great. And we talked earlier about control. Someone who owns 51% is the controlling owner of the business, and there might be a 49% owner, or maybe a couple smaller owners. What happens when you start a business with somebody else and you're 50-50, right? That can be great, right? We heard earlier, there's a co-founder, someone with a creative bent and someone with more of a business bent, or operational bent. Those kind of partnerships can be great, but one thing you want to think about is what happens when you guys don't agree, which will happen, right? We're humans. So you want to think of some way to break a deadlock or a tie. And then the other thing you want to think about if you do have a 50-50 partner or co-owner of your business is what happens if you just can't see eye to eye and one of you wants to leave the business. And that's an important discussion for people to have. It's a little different when you have control of the business and someone's a minority, but when you're 50-50, you can kind of get stuck if things aren't going well. So that's something you'd want to talk to your business lawyer about. I think it's really important to, it's the old oxygen mask approach, take care of yourself first. If you are not getting your sleep, your nutrition, your fun, I think you need to be strong and healthy and centered to do the job of CEO. So make sure that you're getting the self-care you need. It's fun having your own business, and I recommend it to everybody. And most days I love it, right? But it's intense. So just make sure to be mindful of that. And this organization is wonderful for some of that support. Some general tips, and this is really going outside of the back office boot camp, but these are things that have served me well and have served people that I respect very well. Try not to say anything negative about anybody, especially your competitors, former customers. Things will happen to you. You will feel, Arshelle said it's so great. You're not the customer for me. Go away. There's 5 other solid people waiting behind. Yeah, that's going to happen, right? You will have an unhappy customer. You will have somebody who thinks your wonderful product is like really bad, right? Brush it off. Don't react. Don't be defensive. Professional, polished, wins the day every day. So really, just keep it classy out there, people, right? Stuff's going to happen, just don't say anything negative, because it just never comes back well. I also want to reiterate mistakes. Oh my gosh, mistakes. We heard early on, I had written down the name, but I'm so sorry. The founder of Figs, the co-CEO of Figs mentioned she had $100,000 mistake that was devastating. And, it's going to happen, right? You're going to plan and something will go sideways, and it's inevitable. So when it happens to you, just say, oh yeah, that speaker at that thing said that was going to happen. Ultimately, it will be a gift. I guarantee you, you will learn from it. And maybe 5, 10, 20 years, you'll be talking to some new entrepreneurs and you'll say, this happened. And you look back and you're like, I'm sort of glad that happened, because that taught me, in her case, we need to be careful about quality control. We need to stay on top of, the stitches and the inseams. You learn from your mistakes and they will happen. So don't let that derail you. I guess the last thing I will say, and then I'll start kind of working through these questions. I teach a class on entrepreneurship, and my students told me one of the best pieces of advice I gave them was be the duck. Okay. So what's a duck? Duck sits on the, wait, hold on, we're gonna get the duck. We need the visual there. The duck. So the duck is sitting on the water, right? This is a lake. The duck is here, and you just see the duck kind of like gliding across the lake. Underneath, those little legs are going like this, right? They're paddling frantically. So be the duck. You will be paddling frantically. I guarantee you. When the business, I'll tell you this, you'll start your business and you'll be like, okay, I'm open for business. Come on. And it'll be kind of quiet. And you'll be like, uh-oh. And then it'll hit, we hope, right? And when it hits, it'll be busy. And, businesses grow, and then you're like, they'll grow fast and you realize you need to bring people on and grow, and it can be a bit of a scramble. Never let, above the water, you're the duck. You're calm, you're cool, and you will be paddling. Just your customers don't need to see that. Okay. So that's my big piece of advice. And I will also say, stick it out. You can read a book and it's like, oh, give yourself 6 months of living expenses. I heard someone earlier today say it took a couple years to get going. It can take a while. So stick it out. And as long as the momentum is going in the direction you want it to go and you can cover your living expenses, give it time, because it can take a while for just the word to get out. But if you keep doing a good job at what you're doing, the success will come. So I am going to go through these comments. Let me go to the Q&A. Somebody asked about an NDA. So an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, can also be called a confidentiality agreement. And that's when you want somebody to keep stuff secret, okay? So in the business world, if you are talking to investors, maybe you're about to launch a product and you're trying to get investors to invest in it, you might ask them to sign an NDA so that you can speak freely about your plans, but they can't in turn go down the street and tell anyone else about it. So that's when you would use an NDA. Let's see. Someone's asked, if efforts put into an LLC operating agreement, isn't it best just to start as a benefit corporation? Benefit corporations, let's put it this way. I think you're going to find that most people are familiar with the LLC structure, and there is, let me step back further. There's a lot to do when you run a business, and there's stuff that people just know how to do. Like everyone does it this way. You know, this is like the standard NDA. This is the standard chart of accounts for your accounting system. There's a value in kind of doing things like the tried and true way, unless there's some specific reason you need the custom approach. So to answer this person's question, I don't know about benefit corporations, so I can't answer that. I do know if someone said to me, hey, Cathie, I'm starting a company, I want to be a business corporation, I would say, okay, I'm going to have to go research that and figure that out for you. That's going to cost you more than if we did it as an LLC. That could be worth it to that person. But just anytime you're kind of, doing, it's like, building a website, like you can get kind of an off the shelf website that probably looks really good for not that much money. But if you want, the videos and all the other things in there, it's going to cost more. So that wasn't really a substantive answer. A few people have asked about subsidiaries. And so let me explain about subsidiaries. So let's say I set up Cicada Yoga in Maryland, okay? And I realized there's a need. My customers are coming in and like, it's great doing yoga with cicadas, but we would also like massage with cicadas, like hot stone massage, but like we'll use cicadas. I say, that's a great idea. I'm going to set up a different company. I'll call it Cicada Massage. So I've got now 2 LLCs, right? So what I might do is put a company on top here, Cicada Holdings LLC. That's the parent company that owns now these 2 subsidiaries, okay? So I could do it that way, but look, what happened? I've got my LLC up here, I've got my LLC over here, I've got my LLC over here. That means every year I'm thinking, oh, my home state's Maryland. I've got to file an annual report. Should have mentioned this. When you have an LLC and also a corporation, the states will want you to check in every year, file an annual report. It's typically a very short form, but there is a fee attached to that, 100, 300, 800 in California. So when you have a separate legal entity, there's some paperwork involved every year. So what have I done? I've just created 3 separate things I got to keep track of. What I could have done is I set up my LLC, Cicada Yoga, and I realized, there's more of a demand here than I thought. People want to do more with cicadas than just do yoga. I'm going to change the name of my company. I'm going to call it Cicada Lifestyles. That's nice and broad, isn't it? That's something to think about when you're naming your company. Future-proof. You don't know what you're going to end up doing. So maybe give yourself a nice broad name that can grow as your company grows. I didn't do that. I called it Cicada Yoga. Now I realize I'm expanding into massage. I'm going to rename it Cicada Health. And then within that one LLC, I can have 2 divisions. I can have the yoga division and I can have the massage division. Okay. And what does a division mean? Just kind of means what I mean it to mean. It's, how I market myself. Maybe in my accounting system or my bookkeeping system, I track revenues from massage separately from revenues from yoga, but it's within the same legal entity. So sometimes I have clients who be like, I need to set up a new LLC because I'm going to go into this. I'm like, you can do it, but why don't you just set it up as a division? And they're like, oh, that's great. Yeah, I don't have to do any more paperwork. Let's see, some other questions. Julie, I don't know if you want to pop in if you've seen any themes. There's a lot of them, so I want to see. Someone has said, do most tech startups fall into one of the categories of LLC? There she is, magically
I'm
appearing.
back, ready for cicada yoga.
Yeah, I know, right? They're humming outside my window, which is why.
Yes, I love it. I really need that in my life.
Yeah, someone said, do most tech startups fall into one of the categories of LLC, partnership, or corporations? As I said, I've not seen a partnership. I would say, in my experience, tech startups 50-50 between corporations and LLCs.
Yeah. I'd also just add one comment we had going on the Slack was around if you do have a co-founder, we generally recommend not ever doing a 50-50 split, because we've just seen so many issues where you can't, it's so hard to break up. So you do want to make sure you have one person that's either, 55-45, or how you have one decision maker. And we just generally recommend that.
I totally agree. And just to be clear, I was speaking about the situation. What I unfortunately see is people haven't heard that great advice. They've already done it that way. And so they come in, they're like, oh, so if you're in a 50-
we're going to hit them over the head. So if you do have a 50-50 split, go back to your co-founder today. And if you are setting that up, just a nice different split is good. Otherwise, I'm back in the Q&A here. Can you ask for an NDA to be signed after you've already started working with a contractor, or even after they finished a part? Thoughts on that one?
The answer is sure. And I don't want to get too far afield into giving legal advice, but certainly you can cover things. Look, a private contract is whatever you and that person decide, right? So let's say I've been talking to somebody and I realize, oops, I didn't sign an NDA. I can go back to the person and say, hey, would you promise that all the stuff we talked about, you'll keep confidential, and also going forward, you'll keep stuff confidential? Sure, you can write the contract that way. It's just whatever you and the other person agree to. I do have one other tip I wanted to share, which I've seen in the business world, which is be careful not to get squeezed in your financial obligations. So especially if you end up working as a subcontractor for somebody, when you get in the middle between two people, just make sure that you are not promising money before you actually know it's coming in.
Mm-hmm. Good tip.
Principle,
yes. Cash flow. We should do a whole session on just cash flow. Maybe we'll save that for the follow-up. I'm just going to check real quick. Any last other questions?
And while you're doing that, I have some other tips to share too.
Go ahead.
One thing I would say about running a business is, I mentioned this earlier, when you find a vendor, find a vendor that's really easy to work with, that you connect with well, et cetera, et cetera. The same thing goes for you. You want to be that good vendor to your customers and clients. So what I try and do, I'm certainly friendly, I'm myself, I'm authentic, but this is the experience with me is really all about them. So I'm respectful of their time. I start on time, maybe a few pleasantries, but if they say, how are you doing? Believe me, I could tell them how I'm doing. Oh, yeah. You want to hear how I'm doing? Well, this morning, no, that's what you have friends and family and business, colleagues in the community for. With your customers and clients, you want them to have, their time is precious, make it easy for them. And, it's all good. Cicadas are buzzing.
They charge you by the 6 minutes, so you want to keep that. Know how are you doing questions, right? I think that's really strong advice. Anything else as it relates to just the back end, like last minute tips, like how to? Two things that come to mind or questions I would want to just know about would be, how do I know what to look for in either an accountant and or a lawyer? And secondly, anything that you can think about as we're merging out of the pandemic. I know we still got a ways to go, but as women might be entering into lease agreements or new places where they might actually have a little more leverage than they did before. They don't have to sign up for a 3-year lease or anything like that. So anything that's COVID specific as we're emerging out of this that might be helpful for them to keep top of mind.
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously people are grappling with how do we get back into in person? Do we have to require proof of vaccination? What do we do with masks? I mean, that's a whole nother panel. I think in terms of, I would just say, like anything with your business, be responsive to your customers, right? Um, and make sure you customer first. But in terms of, entering into leases, I always say with any contract, it's always exciting to enter into the contract. What am I getting? How much am I paying? You always want to stop and think, what if this doesn't go so well? How do I get out of the contract? And that's especially true with leases because, people have been surprised. They sign an office lease and they're like, the space isn't working out. We want to cancel. We'll give them 30 days notice. And the answer is, well, that's cute, but you signed a year lease. Like you're stuck for a year. You can move out, but you still have to pay for the whole year, even if you've given, So that's the kind of thing when you go into, and if you go into it with your eyes open, great, but you need to kind of think about that back end. And then, in terms of picking an accountant and a lawyer, I would say the following, talk to other business people in your community, see who they use, get recommendations. And then, you should talk to, 2, 3 people. I've had really good luck, finding certain vendors like right off the bat. I'm like, you are awesome. I am, you just know, right? And then I've had other people where I've started working with a vendor and it's just not quite right. And it's hard, right? Because, it's not like they're a bad person or what, it's just not the right fit. But you need to be, okay, I need to terminate that relationship and go find another vendor. So, I would say
I think
one
that's
thing.
super helpful. I think the two
Yeah,
things there are always interview 2 or 3, because you'll find you're going to just get a different perspective. And then to that point, this is a great opportunity to talk amongst yourselves in the next networking session on who do you use? Who do you love? Do you have an accountant that you love? Do you have a lawyer or
right.
somebody like that? So please feel free to ask if you don't have one and put that out to this crew. This whole community is willing
Yeah.
and hands wide up to help you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so one last
Okay.
thing, I know we're right at
Yes.
time. I wanted
Right
to
at
give
time.
real quick what I want everyone to do. I want them to find a moment today or tomorrow when they're not busy and just say to themselves, of course I can do this. Of course. And think of something in your life that was hard and you did. Gals can start a business. It's not that hard. Go for it.
I love that. That's a phenomenal finish. Thank you, Cathie. I think that a lot of what we've heard is that back end, all of the stuff you just covered is very daunting. So you made it very easy to understand, and we're all excited about Cicada Yoga. I think that would be amazing. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a real business place, but launchers, somebody get to it. And otherwise, we're taking the duck with us.